You hear about David and Goliath? You nod. You file it away as ancient history. Then, December 1939 happens in the forests of central Finland, and suddenly you realize the story never ended. 11,000 Finnish reservists, loggers, farmers, hunters who knew every frozen trail, face down 45,000 Soviet troops backed by 150 tanks and 335 artillery pieces. The Red Army expects to slice Finland in half within days. Stalin's 60th birthday is December 21st. The victory parade is already planned. The military band travels with the 44th Division, instruments polished, sheet music ready. What happens instead becomes the most catastrophic division-level destruction of World War II. Two entire Soviet divisions, elite units, mechanized forces, 17,000 men each, vanish into the snow. The Finns lose 900. The Soviets lose at least 22,500, possibly 27,000. Bodies stack in frozen Mottis, cut off pockets of encircled men who never escape. This is not myth. This is Suomussalmi and Rout. Winter War, 1939 to 1940. And every single fact here lands like a hammer. If you value documented military history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the declassified Soviet divisional records for the 163rd and 44th Divisions, released post-1991 dollars, which provide exact casualty figures and command perspectives on the logistical collapse, plus Vesa Nenye, Peter Munter, Tony Virtanen, and Chris Burks. Finland at War, the Winter War. 1939 to 40. Published by Osprey in 2015 with battlefield maps cross-referenced against Finnish National Board of Antiquities Winter War Registry coordinates. Now back to the information. November 30th, 1939. 500,000 Soviet troops storm across Finland's border. Joseph Stalin wants a buffer zone around Leningrad, 32 kilometers from Finnish territory. Finland refuses to cede land. Stalin invades anyway. The world watches. The League of Nations expels the Soviet Union on December 14th. Nobody intervenes. Finland's population is 3.7 million. The Soviet Union's is 105 million. The math feels apocalyptic, but Stalin miscalculates one variable: terrain. Central Finland in winter is not Poland in autumn. It is subarctic wilderness, wild forests, frozen lakes, logging roads that vanish under snow. Roads? Barely. The region around Suomussalmi is 4,000 inhabitants scattered across marsh and taiga. The Soviet Ninth Army gets orders to punch through here, capture the port city of Oulu on the Gulf of Bothnia, and cut Finland in two. Oulu sits 160 kilometers west. Between the border and Oulu, nothing but trees, cold, and Finns who know how to move through both. Two Soviet divisions take the assignment. The 163rd Rifle Division, under Commander Andrei Zelentsov, crosses at Juntusranta in the north with 17,000 men, tanks, cavalry. The 44th Rifle Division, under Alexei Vinogradov, crosses at Rata in the south. Also 17,000 strong, elite Ukrainian troops, mechanized, veteran of the Polish invasion 2 months prior. They advance on two roads towards Suomussalmi, the northern Juntusranta Road and the southern Rata Road. The plan looks clean on the map. Drive west, link up, push to Oulu. Reality is different. The roads are logging trails, 1 tank wide, deep snow on both sides. The Finns see them coming. December 7th, 1939. The 163rd Division captures Suomussalmi. The town is empty. The Finns practiced scorched earth before retreating, destroyed supplies, booby-trapped buildings, torched what they couldn't carry. The Soviets occupy rubble and cold, no shelter. Temperatures hit minus 25 Celsius. The men huddle around fires. Supply lines stretch back to the border. 60 kilometers through forest, Finnish ski troops start cutting those lines. December 9th, Colonel Hjalmar Siilasvuo arrives with Infantry Regiment 27. Siilasvuo is 47 years old, a lawyer in peacetime, newspaper editor's son, speaks bluntly, commands sharply. He fought in World War I with the German Jaeger Battalion on the Eastern Front. Trained in asymmetric warfare, he takes one look at the Soviet columns strung out on narrow roads and sees prey. His orders from Field Marshal Carl Gustav Emil Mannerheim are simple. Stop them. Don't let them reach Oulu. Siilasvuo has maybe 1,600 men initially. The Soviets have 17,000 in Suomussalmi and 17,000 more advancing from Rate. Siilasvuo smiles. The terrain is his artillery. December 11th, Finnish ski troops cut the Rate Road 12 kilometers east of Suomussalmi, severing the southern supply line to the 163rd Division. December 13th, they cut the northern Juntasranta road. Zelentsov's division is now surrounded, pocketed deep in Finnish territory. Zelentsov sends panic messages to 9th Army headquarters. He needs food, fuel, ammunition, reinforcements. The Soviets open a supply route across frozen Lake Kiantajärvi. It's not enough. The Finns own the forests. They move on skis, silent, white camouflage blending with snow. They attack field kitchens first. Hungry men don't fight well. They hit Soviet units at night, fade before dawn, reappear 20 kilometers away. The Soviets call them ghost troops. December 20th, Zelentsov requests permission to retreat. 9th Army refuses. The entire 44th Division is advancing to relieve him. Hold position. Zelentsov holds. His men freeze and starve. Meanwhile, the 44th Division marches west on Rout Road. 17,000 Ukrainians, mechanized, confident. They expect to punch through, rescue the 163rd, drive to Oulu, but December 23rd, Captain J. A. Mäkinen and 350 Finnish troops set up a roadblock between Lakes Kuomasjärvi and Kuavasjärvi, a natural choke point. Heavy machine guns cover the frozen lakes. The Soviets can drive across the ice, abandon their vehicles to move through woods, or charge the machine guns head on. The 44th Division, advancing on a one-tank front, grinds to a halt. Thousands of vehicles, horses, men, and the motorized brass band with instruments and sheet music jam the single-track road. The temperature drops. Blizzards roll in. The column freezes in place. Vinogradov orders defensive positions. His division digs in along 20 miles of Rout Road, strung out, exposed, locked to the road because they have no skis and the snow is waist deep. Siilasvuo is now reinforced. December 22nd, his scattered units officially become the 9th Division. He receives Infantry Regiment 64, a ski guerrilla battalion designated Sissy P1, Bicycle Battalion PPP 6. By Christmas Day, Siilasvuo commands 11,500 men, still outnumbered 3-1 by the combined Soviet forces, but the Finns have mobility. December 26th, 4 ancient 76mm artillery guns arrive. Pre-1904 Russo-Japanese war relics, they still fire. December 28th, a modern battery arrives. January 2nd, 1940, 2 Bofors anti-tank guns. Siilasvuo's artillery is tiny compared to Soviet firepower, but he uses it surgically. Fire, displace, fire again from a new position before Soviet counter-battery finds him. The Finns build ice roads by scraping ground clear and flooding it. Smooth frozen surfaces let troops ski fast and haul supplies on sleds. Siilasvuo can move his whole force 20 kilometers overnight. The Soviets, roadbound, cannot. December 27th, Task Force Suzy, reinforced by Infantry Regiment 65, captures the village of Palovara, cutting off the Soviet 662nd Regiment from supporting the 163rd Division. The Soviets are now split into isolated Mottis, the Finnish word for a bundle of firewood stacked for cutting. Zelentsov's 163rd Division is surrounded at Suomussalmi. The 44th Division is strung along Rout Road in multiple pockets. December 28th. Siilasvuo launches coordinated attacks. He splits his 9th Division into 4 task groups named after commanders: Mäkinen, Mandolin, Mäkiniemi, Kari. Each group targets a specific Motti. The plan is Motti tactics refined to science. Cut the column into segments, isolate each segment, destroy them one by one while preventing mutual support. The Finns move through forests the Soviets cannot enter. They appear from nowhere, strike hard, vanish. Soviet armor is useless off-road. Tanks bog in snow become stationary targets. Finnish troops throw Molotov cocktails, gasoline and tar in bottles with cloth fuses, named sarcastically after Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov, who claimed Soviet planes were dropping food, not bombs, on Finland, drink to go with the food. December 29th to January 1st. 1940. The temperature hits minus 43 Celsius. Soviet soldiers lack proper winter gear. Thousands suffer frostbite before combat even starts. Finnish troops wear white snowsuits, move on skis, carry Suomi KP-31 submachine guns with 71-round drum magazines. Close-range firepower that cuts through Soviet formations. The Red Army has numbers, tanks, artillery. The Finns have speed, knowledge, cold. And the cold is killing more Soviets than bullets. Men freeze to death in their sleep. Entire units are found immobile, frostbitten limbs, unable to retreat or advance. The forests become a frozen graveyard. January 1st, 1940. Siilasvuo has finished with Zelentsov's 163rd Division. It's shattered. Survivors try breaking out south on December 24th. JR. 27th 2nd Battalion stops them. They try breaking west on December 25th. Stopped again, January 2nd, the last organized resistance inside Suomussalmi ends. The 163rd Division ceases to exist as a fighting force. Zelentsov is dead or captured. Records conflict. Approximately 9,000 Soviet troops are killed, captured, or missing. The Finns lose 200. Silasvuo immediately loots captured equipment, 43 tanks, 70 field guns, 278 trucks, 1,170 horses, 29 anti-tank guns, 300 machine guns, 6,000 rifles, ammunition, medical supplies. He distributes it all to his troops on the spot. Morale soars. They've beaten one elite Soviet division. Now they turn to the second. The 44th Division on Rout Road is trapped, but still 17,000 strong. January 5th, 1940, 0830 hours, Silasvuo orders the decisive attack. Task Groups Mandolin and Makaniemi hit the main concentration at Haukila, 12 kilometers from Suomussalmi, where most Soviet troops are dug in. Task Group Kari blocks the eastern escape route toward the border. Task Group Fagernes secures a strategic bridge. The Finns attack from all sides simultaneously. By morning of January 6th, Finnish blocking positions reinforced with mines cut the Soviet column into at least 8 separate Mottis. The Soviets try armored breakouts. Tanks charge Finnish roadblocks. Lose tanks. Try again. Lose more. January 6th, heavy fighting all along Rout Road. The Soviets fight hard but disorganized. Command breaks down. Vinogradov sends a message requesting discretion to act on his own initiative. Ninth Army refuses. Hold. Fight. Win. Vinogradov knows his division is finished. January 6th, late evening, after more frantic messages, Ninth Army finally authorizes tactical withdrawal. Too late. January 6th, 21:30 hours, Vinogradov orders retreat to the Soviet border. It becomes chaos. Units disintegrate. Officers abandon their men. Vinogradov himself flees through the forest with 2 chief officers, Volkov and Pahomov. They reach Soviet lines 4 days later. A military tribunal of the Ninth Army court-martials them immediately. Guilty of cowardice, incompetence, abandoning troops mid-battle, sentenced to death. January 11th, 1940. Vinogradov and his officers are publicly executed in front of a formation. Stalin's emissary, Lev Meklis, personally oversees the executions to send a message. The Stavka, Soviet High Command, tries to deflect blame onto the commanders, but internal reports admit the Stavka made the critical decisions, keeping the 44th Division on Rout Road after the 163rd lost Suomussalmi, refusing Vinogradov's retreat requests, ignoring terrain and weather. January 7th, 1940, en masse, noon. All Soviet resistance on Rout Road is suppressed. Finnish troops spend 2 days mopping up, rounding up hundreds of starving freezing survivors stumbling through forests. Small groups of Soviet soldiers try reaching the border through northern woods. Most freeze to death. A few make it back. Sergeant Pyotr Andreevich Morozov, a Ukrainian veteran of Rout Road, is interviewed in 1991 by Finnish writer Leo Kartamo. Morozov says Finns returned prisoners of war after the Winter War ended, but none reached home. The NKVD, Soviet secret police, executed all returned POWs in summer 1940, suspected of treason for surrendering. That's Stalin's Soviet Union. Survive the Finns, die anyway. The battlefield tells the story in frozen detail. Finnish troops find 43 tanks abandoned or destroyed, 270 vehicles, trucks, tractors, prime movers, in various states of ruin, 27,500 stiff Soviet bodies from the 44th, 163rd, and supporting units. A Finnish officer looks at the carnage and says, "The wolves will eat well this winter." The captured equipment inventory is staggering. From both divisions combined, 85 tanks, 437 trucks, 1,620 horses, 52 cannons, 40 field artillery pieces, 78 anti-tank guns, 20 tractors, 13 anti-aircraft guns, over 6,000 rifles, vast ammunition. The military band's instruments and sheet music are found intact, never played. The victory parade for Oulu never happens. If you value documented military history like this, subscribe. Comment which city you're hearing this from. This script uses factual sources. The January 1940 Stavka Commission Report on 44th Division casualties, published mid-war, which documented 4,674 total casualties from the division, 1,001 dead, 1,430 wounded, 2,243 missing, starting from January 1st, after the division had already suffered 2 weeks of losses. Plus, historian Yuri Keelan's post-Soviet archival work published in 2007 in Talvisoden Taisteluja, showing that 44th Division strength dropped from 13,962 men at year's end to 9,288 by battle's end. These are Soviet records, not Finnish estimates. Now back to the story. Casualty figures for Suomussalmi and Rout are contested, but ranges converge. American historian Alan Chu estimates total Soviet casualties at 22,500. David Campbell estimates 22,500 to 27,000. Brian Best estimates 27,000 killed in action, plus 2,100 captured. Finnish historians initially estimated around 17,000 based on POW interrogations. But post-Cold War access to Soviet archives revised figures upward. Most recent Finnish studies indicate at least 22,000 to 24,000 Soviet dead and missing from both battles combined. Russian historian Grigory Krivosheyev's 1997 study of Soviet casualties lists 126,875 Soviet dead and missing for the entire Winter War, with 391,783 total casualties. Suomussalmi accounts for roughly 18 to 20% of total Soviet dead in a war lasting 105 days. 2 battles in 6 weeks at one small town. Finnish casualties, 900 dead at Suomussalmi, 400 at Rate Road specifically. The disparity is grotesque, roughly 25 Soviet dead for every Finn killed. This is not typical warfare, this is annihilation. And the strategic impact is immediate. The Ninth Army's drive to Oulu stops dead. Finland is not cut in two. Swedish supply routes stay open. Finnish troops in the north and south remain connected. The entire Soviet Central Offensive collapses. Stalin's 60th birthday on December 21st passes without victory. The Red Army's reputation for invincibility is shattered. International observers, especially Nazi Germany, take note, Adolf Hitler watches the Winter War closely. The Red Army's poor performance, massive casualties, logistical chaos, inability to adapt to terrain and weather, convinces him the Soviet Union is vulnerable. 18 months later, June 1941, Germany invades the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev later admits, all of us, and Stalin first and foremost, sensed in our victory a defeat by the Finns. It was a dangerous defeat because it encouraged our enemies' conviction that the Soviet Union was a colossus with feet of clay. Why did it happen? Multiple factors converge. Terrain. The Kainuu region around Suomussalmi is forested marshland with few roads. Soviet mechanized divisions need roads to move tanks and artillery. Finnish ski troops don't. They move cross-country, through forests, across frozen lakes, invisible to Soviet recon. The Soviets advance in long columns, vulnerable to ambush. Every choke point becomes a kill zone. Climate. Winter. 1939 to 40 is the second coldest in Finland since 1828. Temperatures drop to minus 43 Celsius. Soviet troops lack adequate winter clothing. Frostbite casualties exceed 10% in some units before crossing the Finnish border. The Finns are equipped for subarctic winter. Layered wool, felt boots, white camouflage. They operate in conditions that incapacitate Soviet forces. Mobility. Finnish troops on skis cover terrain the Soviets cannot enter. Speed matters. The Finns hit a Soviet position, kill the officers, destroy the field kitchen, and vanish before Soviet artillery responds. The Soviets, tied to roads, move slowly, predictably. Finnish intelligence intercepts Soviet radio and phone communications. The Soviets use standard phone lines, easily tapped. Finnish listing posts know Soviet positions, strengths, plans in near real time. Leadership. Siilasvuo is 47, experienced, flexible, aggressive. He reads terrain, exploits Soviet mistakes, distributes captured equipment immediately to maintain momentum. Zelentsov panics, sends desperate messages, never takes initiative. Vinogradov advances blindly into a trap, ignores scouts, warnings, and when the trap closes, flees. Soviet command structure is rigid, over-centralized. Junior officers can't adapt without permission from higher command. The Finns decentralize. Squad leaders make tactical decisions on the spot. Training. Finnish reservists are hunters, loggers, farmers who know the forests intimately. They've skied since childhood, shot rifles for hunting, understand cold weather survival. Soviet troops include recent conscripts, many from Ukraine and southern regions with no winter warfare experience. The elite 81st Mountain Rifle Regiment fights well, but it's a small portion of the 163rd Division. Most Soviet soldiers are unprepared for the environment. Tactics. Motti is not new, but the Finns perfected at Suomussalmi. Cut the enemy column into segments, isolate each segment, destroy them one by one, prevent reinforcement. Siilasvuo divides his 9th Division into multiple task groups, each operating semi-independently, coordinating through runners and radio. The Soviets try brute force, throw tanks and men at Finnish positions, loses tanks and men, Try again, lose more, no tactical innovation, morale. The Finns are defending their homeland from invasion. Motivation is absolute. Soviet troops are told they're liberating Finnish workers from capitalist oppression. Reality doesn't match propaganda. The Finnish workers they encounter are shooting at them. Soviet morale collapses when officers flee, food stops arriving, and cold kills men in their sleep. Discipline breaks down. Some Soviet units surrender en masse, others disintegrate into fleeing individuals. Logistics. Soviet supply lines stretch 60 to 80 kilometers from the border to Suomussalmi and Rout Road through single-track forest trails. Finnish ski troops cut these lines repeatedly. No fuel, no food, no ammunition. Soviet units become stationary targets. The Finns have short supply lines. Suomussalmi is inside Finland. Supplies come from south and west on roads they control. Finnish logistics are lean but functional. Soviet logistics are theoretically superior, huge supply dumps. Mechanized transport, but in practice, collapse completely when those single-track roads get cut. The human cost is appalling beyond numbers. Soviet soldiers freeze to death in improvised camps. Finnish patrols find entire Soviet platoons, frozen solid, still in defensive positions. One Finnish soldier describes poking a Soviet corpse in the eye with a stick to confirm death. The body was frozen so completely it looked alive. Wounded Soviet soldiers, unable to evacuate, freeze where they fall. The Finns bury 27,500 Soviet bodies in mass graves as the weather warms in early spring to prevent epidemics. Graves are marked on maps with crosses or poles. Later, the maps disappear. Around Easter, 1940, or Astiau, the Soviets request permission to gather their dead and bring them home. Finland refuses to let Red Army officials cross the border, but delivers 300 bodies from near Rout village to Soviet officials. After the continuation war, the Red Army occupies the Rout Road area, collects wartime debris, but leaves the bodies alone. The fate of the 44th Division remains unmentioned in Soviet historiography for decades. Only after the Soviet Union collapses do Russian historians access the archives. Silasvuo's forces continue operations. The 9th Division is sent to Kumo sector to deal with the Red Army 54th Division. Silasvuo arrives with all the captured weaponry from Suomussalmi and Rout. He orders an artillery barrage of 3,200 rounds, something unheard of in Finnish forces during the Winter War. The 54th Division is pinned but survives until the peace treaty. Silasvuo is promoted to Major General in 1940. He receives the Mannerheim Cross. Second class, on December 21st, 1944, for distinguished service throughout the war. He publishes a book on the Battle of Suomussalmi in 1940. Historian Mikko Wola later criticizes the book for taking all credit and ignoring other commanders like superiors Viljo Tuompo and Paavo Susitaival, plus subordinates like Alpo Martinen. Silasvuo is a hero in Finland, but not without flaws. The Winter War continues until March 13th. 1940, Finland signs the Moscow Peace Treaty, ceding 11% of its territory to the Soviet Union, including the Karelian Isthmus, the city of Viipuri, and the northern port of Petsamo. The Finns lose 25,904 dead per 43,557 wounded. Total Finnish casualties, 68,480, nearly 2% of the population. Soviet casualties are disputed. Official Soviet figures published during the war claim 48,475 dead and 158,863 wounded. Post-Soviet Russian estimates are much higher. Krivosheyev's 1997 study: 126,875 dead and missing, 188,671 wounded. Total casualties, 391,783. Some estimates go higher. Finnish historian Otto Manninen calculates the Soviet 7th Army alone lost 1,244 tanks during breakthrough battles at the Mannerheim Line. Total Soviet tank losses range from 1,200 to 3,543, depending on source. The League of Nations expels the Soviet Union on December 14, 1939. International support for Finland materializes late and insufficient. Britain and France plan a military expedition to aid Finland, but Norway and Sweden refuse right of passage. Fearing German retaliation, no Allied troops arrive. Finland stands alone and wins every tactical battle but loses the strategic war. The Soviets eventually break through the Mannerheim Line in February 1940 with overwhelming artillery, one of the largest bombardments since World War I. Finnish defenses crack, ammunition runs out, troops are exhausted, Mannerheim urges peace. The Finns negotiate while they still have bargaining power. The treaty is harsh, but Finland survives. Suomussalmi and Rout Road become legend. Military academies worldwide study the battles as classic examples of asymmetric warfare, terrain exploitation, Motti tactics, small, mobile, well-led forces defeating vastly superior enemies through innovation and knowledge of ground. The victories boost Finnish morale during a war they are losing overall. The defeats humiliate the Soviet Union internationally and embolden Nazi Germany to attack. The Winter War is a prelude to the Continuation War, where Finland allies with Germany against the Soviet Union in June 1941, trying to reclaim lost territories. That war also ends badly for Finland, but that's another story. Today, the battlefield at Suomussalmi and Rout Road is preserved. The Winter War Monument, designed by Erkki Pulinen, stands at Rout Road, a field of thousands of natural stones surrounded by forest scarred by artillery. The monument commemorates Finnish and Soviet soldiers who died. Finnish records state 900 Finns fell at Suomussalmi. Soviet casualties are listed as uncertain. Initial Finnish estimates were 24,000, but no one can count the exact number of Red Army dead. Many remain buried in unmarked mass graves in the forests. A memorial publication at Raatiin Portti Museum explains 2 Red Army divisions, the 163rd and 44th Rifle, crossed the border at Suomussalmi. During the Winter War, a Soviet division was around 17,500 men strong. The 44th Division was virtually entirely wiped out along Rout Road. Visitors walk the ground in winter. Snow covers the battlefield. The roads are still narrow. The forests are still dense. The lakes are still frozen. Standing at Haukila, where Task Groups Mandalin and Makiniemi attacked on January 5th, you see the terrain choke point. Tanks can't maneuver. Infantry can't spread out. The road is a funnel. Finnish troops appeared from the forests on both sides, invisible until they opened fire. The Soviet column had nowhere to go. Forward was blocked. Retreat was cut. The forest was impassable without skis. The cold was minus 40 Celsius. The Soviets died where they stood or fled into the woods and froze. It's a killing ground engineered by geography and weather. The Finns just pulled the trigger. The captured equipment tells its own story. 43 tanks, 85 tanks from both battles combined. Soviet armored doctrine emphasized mass tank assaults. At Suomussalmi Rada, the tanks became tombs, immobilized in snow. Unable to traverse frozen forest, vulnerable to Molotov cocktails and Finnish ski troops who closed to point-blank range, the tank crews abandoned their vehicles or died inside. Finnish troops used captured Soviet tanks for the rest of the war. 6,000 rifles captured. 300 machine guns. 70 field guns. Finnish forces were desperately under-equipped at the war's start. Old weapons, limited ammunition, almost no tanks or aircraft. The Suomussalmi Rata Hall was a windfall. Siilasvuo's decision to distribute captured equipment immediately to his troops, rather than sending it to rear depots, kept his 9th Division combat effective. Morale soared when Finnish soldiers saw they were winning not just battles, but supply wars. The Soviet military band found with the 44th Division is darkly symbolic. Instruments polished, sheet music ready, banners prepared for a victory parade in Oulu that never happened. The band members probably froze to death or were captured. Their instruments were looted or left in the snow. Stalin wanted a quick, triumphant war. Invade November 30th, cut Finland in half, parade in Oulu by mid-December, peace treaty by New Year. Reality shattered the timeline. The band is a monument to Soviet overconfidence. The Soviet executions of commanders also reveal the system's brutality. Vinogradov, Volkov, Pahomov court-martialed and shot January 11th. Zelentsov, dead or captured. Multiple generals executed for winter war failures. Stalin needs scapegoats. He can't admit the Red Army was unprepared. Poorly led at high levels and strategically inept. Easier to shoot division commanders than acknowledge systematic failures. Soviet soldiers knew this, survive the Finns, get executed by the NKVD, or die fighting, or freeze. No good options. Soviet morale never recovered during the Winter War. The geopolitical consequences ripple for years. Hitler sees the Winter War as proof the Red Army is weak. Purged officer corps, rigid doctrine, poor logistics, no adaptability. He accelerates planning for Operation Barbarossa. June 22nd, 1941, Germany invades the Soviet Union with 3 million troops. The initial German advance is devastating. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet POWs, huge territorial gains, Red Army units collapsing. The Winter War's humiliation directly contributes to Hitler's confidence. Of course, Hitler also ignores the lesson the Winter War should have taught. Invading in winter is brutal. Logistics collapse, terrain matters, and Soviet resilience is underestimated. By December 1941, the Germans are bogged down outside Moscow in the coldest winter in decades. The Soviets counterattack. The Eastern Front becomes a meat grinder. The Red Army eventually wins, but at a cost of millions dead. The Winter War's shadow stretches from Finland to Stalingrad. Finland's position is tragic. 1940, peace treaty, cedes territory. Finland rearmed, allies with Germany in 1941, invades Soviet Union trying to reclaim lost land. The continuation war rages until 1944. Finland signs an armistice with the Soviet Union in September 1944, forced to fight Germans in the Lapland War to satisfy Soviet demands. Silas Vuo commands Finnish forces evicting Germans from Lapland. 1,000 Finns die. 2,000 Germans die. Finland survives World War II as an independent nation, a rare outcome for small countries caught between great powers, but pays heavily: territorial losses, reparations, political concessions. The Winter War's final tally: Finland loses 11% of territory, including Viipuri, Finland's second largest city. 400,000 Finns evacuated from ceded areas. Economic damage: 25,904 dead. But Finland maintains sovereignty. Contrast with Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, absorbed into the Soviet Union in 1940. Occupied for 50 years. Finland's stubborn resistance in the Winter War, symbolized by Suomussalmi and Rout Road, convinces Stalin that conquering all of Finland would cost too much. Better to take territory and leave Finland semi-independent as a buffer. The Finnish army's performance, especially at Suomussalmi Rate, earns respect even from enemies. Silas Vuo dies January 11th, 1947, exactly 7 years after Vinogradov's execution. Natural causes, age 54. His son Ensio becomes a general, serves in UN peacekeeping forces. The Silas Vuo name remains respected in Finnish military history. Mannerheim becomes president of Finland after the Continuation War, serves until 1946. He dies in 1951 in Switzerland, age 83, honored as the savior of Finnish independence. The equipment captured at Suomussalmi Rate sustained Finnish forces for months, ammunition especially. Finnish industry couldn't produce enough. Every captured Soviet round, shell, grenade was precious. The psychological impact was also critical. Finnish troops saw they could beat the Red Army in stand-up fights, not just ambushes. Soviet troops saw their divisions destroyed, their commanders executed, their strategy failing. Morale is force multiplication. The Finns had it. The Soviets lost it. The forests around Suomussalmi and Rout Road still hold relics. Metal detectorists find shell casings, helmet fragments, frozen equipment. Mass graves are located but largely undisturbed. War cemeteries, marked or unmarked. Local guides know the spots. Tourism is respectful. Battlefield walks in January, anniversary of the battle, attract history enthusiasts. Standing in minus 20 Celsius, walking the Rout Road, you feel it. The cold cuts through layers. The forest is silent. Visibility is limited in blowing snow. Moving off the road means wading through waist-deep powder. Skis help, but it's exhausting. Imagine doing this while being shot at, while hungry, while your officers fled and your supply convoy is burning behind you. The Soviet soldiers at Rout Road died in hell frozen solid. The Finnish defenses were not fortresses. The Mannerheim line on the Karelian Isthmus was just barbed wire, trenches, some bunkers, machine gun nests connecting lakes and marshes. Mannerheim himself said, "The Mannerheim line is the Finnish soldier standing in the snow." At Suomussalmi Rate, there were no fixed defenses at all, just men on skis with rifles and submachine guns, moving faster than the enemy, hitting harder, disappearing, improvised warfare elevated to art. Silas Vuo's Mottis tactics weren't invented for the Winter War. Finnish commanders had studied encirclement tactics and Russian Civil War lessons, but Suomussalmi Rate perfected the execution. The Soviet columns at Rout Road stretched 20 miles, 17,000 men, vehicles, horses, artillery, packed bumper to bumper on a single-track road. When the Finns cut the column into 8 segments, each segment became isolated. No communication, no coordination, no mutual support. Each Motti fought alone. The Finns attacked one Motti, destroyed it, moved to the next. Serial killing of division-sized forces, one pocket at a time. Efficient, brutal, effective. Temperature matters more than people realize. Minus 43 Celsius is minus 45 Fahrenheit. Exposed skin freezes in minutes. Frostbite is guaranteed without proper clothing. Weapons malfunction, oil freezes, metal becomes brittle. Vehicles won't start, batteries die. The Soviet troops, many in standard issue uniforms inadequate for subarctic conditions, suffered frostbite rates of 10% before even engaging Finnish forces. Once engaged, wounded men left in the cold died within hours. Medical evacuation was impossible. Soviet ambulances couldn't move off-road. Finnish ski troops controlled the roads. Wounded Soviets froze where they fell. Finnish medics prioritized their own casualties. Soviet wounded were collected if possible, but many weren't. The cold was the third army in the battle. killing impartially but favoring the side with better gear. The Finns had better gear. Soviet political officers, politruks, tried maintaining morale with propaganda and threats. Finnish troops found plaited leather whips sewn with ball bearings among captured Soviet equipment. Polytrucks used them to encourage soldiers, beat men into fighting. It didn't work. When officers flee and you're being beaten to advance into Finnish machine gun fire, morale collapses. Some Soviet units mutinied, others surrendered en masse. The NKVD later executed suspected mutineers and POWs, but during the battle, surrender seemed preferable to freezing or being shot. Finnish casualties at Rout Road, 400. 400 Finns destroyed 17,000 Soviets. Casualty exchange ratio, 42-1. This is not typical combat. This is systematic slaughter enabled by terrain, weather, training, leadership, and Soviet incompetence. The Soviets learned from the Winter War. By June 1941, when Finland joins the Continuation War, Soviet tactics have improved. Winter gear is better. Command is less rigid, but the lesson came at a terrible price. The Suomussalmi battle is studied in military academies because it demonstrates principles that transcend time. Know your terrain, use mobility, exploit enemy weaknesses, maintain morale, adapt rapidly. Silasvuo's 9th Division did all of this. The Soviets did none. The result was predictable once engaged, but the Soviets never expected engagement. They expected Finnish collapse. Stalin's Red Army invaded Poland in September 1939, met minimal resistance, suffered under 1,000 casualties. 2 months later, invade Finland. Same expectation, different result. Finland was not Poland. The Finns were not divided, not surprised, not demoralized. They were ready, angry, and fighting for survival. The captured Soviet tanks at Suomussalmi Rata included T-26 light tanks and BT-5 fast tanks. Good armor by 1939 standards, useless in deep snow. Finnish troops sometimes just walked up to immobilized tanks and tossed Molotov cocktails through hatches or vision slits. Tank crews burned alive or abandoned vehicles. Later, Finnish engineers recovered functional tanks, repaired them, repainted them with Finnish markings, used them, same with trucks, artillery, machine guns. The war was a scavenger hunt for the Finns. Every Soviet unit destroyed was a Finnish supply depot. The Soviet objective, cutting Finland in half at Oulu, was strategically sound but operationally impossible given the terrain and season. Oulu is a major port. Cutting Finland there isolates the north from the south, severs Swedish supply routes, allows separate Soviet campaigns against isolated Finnish forces. On paper, brilliant. In reality, the road from Suomussalmi to Oulu was 160 kilometers through wilderness. Finnish troops controlled every kilometer. The Soviets never got close. The Ninth Army's entire central offensive collapsed at Suomussalmi Rata. Stalin shifted focus to the Karelian Isthmus, where Soviet forces eventually broke through in February 1940 with massed artillery in overwhelming numbers. That's where the war was decided, grinding attrition at the Mannerheim Line. But Suomussalmi Rata saved Finland from a two-front war. Soviet casualties for the entire Winter War: 126,875 dead and missing, 188,671 wounded, total 391,783. War duration, 105 days, average Soviet casualties per day, 3,733. For comparison, our SNI, the United States suffered 407,000 total military deaths in all of World War II over 3.5 years. The Soviets suffered nearly that many casualties in 3.5 months fighting Finland. Scale matters. The Red Army eventually won through attrition, but the cost was staggering and the political embarrassment profound. The Finnish memory of the Winter War remains strong. Suomussalmi and Rout Road are national symbols of resistance, ingenuity, and sacrifice. Schools teach the battles. Veterans are honored. The wars, Winter War, Continuation War, Lapland War, defined modern Finnish identity. Small nation, large enemies, survival through toughness. The Finns didn't win the Winter War in the strategic sense. They lost territory, but they won every moral victory and most tactical ones. Suomussalmi Rata epitomizes that paradox. The weather during the battles was not anomalous. Finnish winters are brutal. Central Finland in December-January regularly sees -30 to -40 Celsius. The Finns know this. They live with it. They prepare for it. The Soviets invaded in late November expecting quick victory before deep winter set in. Miscalculation. By late December, the coldest part of winter arrived. Soviet supply lines failed. Troops froze. Equipment failed. The Finns operated normally. This is home field advantage at its most extreme. The fate of Soviet POWs captured at Suomussalmi is grim. Finland held 5,572 Soviet POWs total during the Winter War. After the Moscow Peace Treaty, Finland returned them per the agreement. Of the returned prisoners, 450 were released, 4,000. 354 were sentenced to labor camps ranging from 3 to 10 years. 414 were accused of traitorous activities while in captivity. 334 cases were transferred to the Supreme Court of the Soviet Union. 232 of those ended in death penalties. Sergeant Morozov's 1991 testimony states all returned. Rade Road POWs were executed in summer 1940. Stalin's paranoia: surrender was treason, captivity was collaboration, survival was suspect. The NKVD killed them. Soviet soldiers knew this. It adds another layer of terror to the battles. Fight and die, or surrender and get executed by your own side later. The final image from Rout Road, January 8th, 1940. Finnish troops walked the battlefield. 27,500 frozen Soviet corpses. Tanks abandoned mid-column. Trucks burned. Horses dead in harnesses. Artillery pieces intact but crewless. Supply crates unopened. Personal belongings scattered. The military band's instruments lying in snow. Sheet music for victory marches fluttering in wind. One soldier picks up a trumpet, frozen solid. Tries to play it. No sound. The cold has taken everything. The forest is silent. The wolves will eat well this winter. Finland survives. The Soviet Union loses 2 divisions and its reputation. And history records that 11,000 Finnish reservists destroyed 45,000 Soviet troops in 6 weeks of winter hell. The math doesn't lie. The dead don't either.